Joining me to discuss the Senate DFL's first 6 bills that were recently laid out, we have Senate Minority Leader David Hann. Thanks for joining us, Senator.
Good to be here.
Let's begin with the Senate DFL's first 6 bills, as I just mentioned, and a transportation funding package is expected shortly as well. Now, these aren't necessarily the top 6 priorities of the Senate DFL. How would you characterize these bills?
Well, I think probably 3 or 4 of them are bills that will probably get some bipartisan support. I don't think there's any issue about flood relief and those kinds of things. I think there are 2 of the bills, though, that do raise some questions for us, the 2 that have to do with education. One is a basically free college tuition for 2 years, and the other is the free daycare for 4-year-olds. Both of those bills, as we've looked at them, are problematic in that they don't have any kind of estimate of cost. We've tried to do that on our own. We think that that pre-K, that 4-year-old program could cost maybe $800 million over the biennium, and that would go on forever. That is a lot of money. It's also, these are not means-tested programs, which means that if you're a millionaire and you want your kids to have daycare, you can have it for free. If you want them to go to college, they can go to college for free for 2 years. We think there are problems with this, and fundamentally, they don't get at the real problem that we have in education, which is in the K-12 system, making sure that kids are learning to read, write, do math, and graduate on time. Neither one of these things addresses that. That should be the fundamental thing we focus on in education this year.
Now, as you mentioned, Senate Majority Leader Tom Bach also stated that there should be some strong bipartisan support for many of these measures. You touched upon it briefly. Do you think that this kind of sets the tone for a collaborative session, or how would you characterize this?
Well, we've always had a collaborative session. You know, we always work together, and at the end of the day, we have to agree, which is a good thing about state government. And I think the dynamic of having a Republican majority in the House and Democrat majority in the Senate does change the tone, if you will. There's going to have to be, at some point, those 2 sides have to come together and work something out. So I think that these are not necessarily the most partisan bills you could approach or start out with, but there are going to be very, very strong differences in how we do things. I think transportation is another area where the House talked about it quite a lot. There was nothing in the first 6 bills on the Democrat side, but they are going to come out with something later on. I think the approaches that both sides take in that are going to be very different.
Senator Bach does stress that he does not see a need to raise any general fund dollars, not raise taxes anyway, that go into the general fund. This is something you obviously support, but do you support spending at a level that uses some of the surplus, or would you propose tax cuts?
Well, we want to see the money in effect returned. We think there ought to be real tax reform. We need to try to do something at some point to make the state more economically competitive, and we think the tax burdens are high. We had a $2.5 billion tax increase last year. We already have high income taxes, high corporate taxes. We already have a pretty high gas tax. I'm not so sure. I think that the Democrats are going to propose some kind of a gas tax, whether it's on wholesale or at the pump. I'm not sure. The governor wants to do that. But we think that the appetite among the public, among the businesses, is not to do that. We can find the money that we need to make, and we do need to make a strong commitment to transportation. But we can do that by prioritizing our spending and trying to get efficiencies out of the system that we have today.
Should general fund dollars be used for transportation? Senator Bach says no.
I think they should be. It is a priority. It is something the Constitution talks about that we need to do. We spend general fund dollars on education. Why not for transportation as well? What he doesn't like, I think, is the fact that then you have to have transportation competing for the dollars that are already being spent. And I think this fundamentally shows that the Democrats don't really want to do the prioritization. They want to do everything plus. We're saying we've got a $40 billion budget. We can certainly find $200, $300, $400 million a year and put it into transportation if we have the will to do it.
Let's talk briefly about the House GOP laying out its first 5 bills. They include asking the federal government to opt out of MNsure, requiring the Department of Transportation to dedicate its funding towards highway, roads, and bridges, among other things. Essentially, Speaker Kurt Daudt said, the 5 pieces of legislation we are introducing today reflect issues that matter most to Minnesotans. At first blush, would you agree?
Yeah, I think they've done a good job of trying to capture some legislation on the major issues that we're facing: transportation, education, healthcare, the economy. I think they've tried to put together a pretty good package that I think should get bipartisan support, but it is a very different approach. I don't think you're going to have the Democrats agree to not do a tax cut or a gas tax increase. I don't know that you're going to take the same approach on education reform. The House has talked about doing things to increase the number of good teachers we have and to have teacher qualifications and make sure graduation means something, and have some standards. Those are not the things Democrats have talked about. So I think it's a good start. It's a different tone, a different approach, but you have to have something to talk about at the end of the day.
And let's jump ahead to the end of the day. Obviously, we're very early in, but
Right.
given this first week of session, how do you expect session to play out? Do you think there will be a lot of collaboration, or is there going to be a lot of headbutting?
Well, I think there are significant differences, and we will find at the end of the day there will be probably a period of time where we won't know what the deal is going to look like, and there may be even some uncertainty about whether it gets done. I think it will get done. There's no reason for us to go into special session this year. We've got a surplus, so-called, but I think there's going to be some real challenges in getting the two sides together.
Okay, Mr. Minority Leader, thank you so much for your time.
You bet.